Hello, I'm your host, Shoshana Goldstein Nissenbaum, and instead of our usual podcast, Divorcing with Dignity, for the 9 days, we are going to be focusing on building from the rubble. We are going to reflect on building Hashem's house and rebuilding our houses, rebuilding relationships, rekindling relationships, authenticity, vulnerability, and intimacy. I'm very honored to have with me Ilana Cowland. Ilana is a sought-after and international speaker, relationship educator, and author whose work has inspired audiences around the world. Drawing on Jewish wisdom and over 30 years of marriage to her husband, Jamie, Ilana brings warmth, humor, and a hard-won insight to the topics of love, intimacy, and authentic connection. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so
And
much for having me.
if we could just dive in right into the topic. When we're sitting now during these days of mourning for the Beis HaMikdash, of Hashem's home, and there are so many of us in our personal lives who are having difficulties in our homes, who don't have a home, who have a broken home, who are trying to rebuild their home. And we know that the house that we have, our homes are parallel to God's home, to the Beis HaMikdash. And our homes are a mikdash ma'at. They're mini temples for Hashem. And every time we're building our homes, we are building Hashem's home and making a home for him. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, as a Toanet Rabbanit, a divorce halachic advocate, I often wonder, and I see couples come to me and they could be married for years. And recently I've had a lot of what's called gray divorce, which are people over 50 getting divorced, married for sometimes 35, 40 years even, getting divorced. And how does it happen, right? How do these cracks in the foundation happen that this couple who sometimes it's 5 years, 1 year, 30 years, 40 years, doesn't matter. They loved each other so much and they were so in tune with each other and in sync with each other. And all of a sudden, they sometimes can't even sit in the same room in front of me to do a mediation. And they're, mamish, this is a churban. How did the churban happen? And, to me, sometimes it's like bankruptcy, right? We're like, you have one bad deal here, one irresponsible move there, and then you wake up one morning and you're drowning in debt. How does that happen?
Yeah. Oof. Um, I mean, to say there's only one answer is irresponsible. You have some couples that it wasn't great from the beginning. They just got really, really good at pretending it was manageable, until literally their bodies can't fake it anymore. I've had people say to me, I'm finally leaving my marriage. I was never going to, but my body won't let me stay. So you have those sorts of scenarios.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you have scenarios of people who just got into really slow, bad habits. Revolver talks about this. He talks about the fact that if you're not careful, ahava can become sinner. He talks about it when he talks about the midah of hakpada, when people hold on to things that they are not dealing with properly. And it's interesting, if I can say so, I think it's a little bit part of the negative side of the wonderful Baruch Hashem mentality, where everything's fine and everybody's got good middos and everybody thinks that having good middos is always smiling and being, nice and kind. What people don't realize is that having good middos could also mean I need to know and I have to challenge my own middos and apply a different aspect for what's necessary over here. If I'm someone who doesn't like confrontation, that's not having good middos. That's good middos when that applies. If your marriage requires you to talk about what's wrong, it's being stuck in your good middah to not talk about it. Um,
Absolutely.
you
Which
know,
is like one of my big things is do a prenup. Because the prenup, you have to have these really hard conversations. And by the way, if you don't have a prenup, the government provides you with one. Whether you're living in America, England, or Israel, any Western country has laws regarding division of assets. So you
yeah.
have a prenup. The question is, do you want it to be yours or do you want it to be the government? So just like
Mhm.
we don't really like to depend on the government, right? We're familiar with the inefficiency, bureaucracy, ridiculousness. So too
Yeah.
with prenups, but what you're saying, and I want to, if you don't mind, I want to stop you on something you said because I think it's so strong in it and it needs a lot of explanation. Um, but that having when a couple sits down to do a prenup, they have to have these difficult conversations, and it's better than dating and better than resourcing. It's the best way to have a real litmus test. Are we compatible?
Yeah,
Can you talk about difficult things? How do you
yeah,
talk about difficult things?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So you said
And
you quoted Rav Wolba that Ava becomes sinner. Can you expand on that? Because that's wow.
yeah, well, it's interesting when I teach his piece on this. I often ask people, have they ever heard of the Midah Hakpada? And people often don't know what I'm talking about. Then I'll say, oh, do you know what it means to be makbid? Oh, yes, that's when you're very, very careful with your trumas and maestros. I'm like, yes, that's also true. But there's a negative side of hakpada, which is when you are holding on to things that actually need to be processed. It's the same idea. You're being very meticulous, but you're holding on to something which needs to be let go of. That um, the concept of lo sisno es achicha bilvavecha, right? Why does it say bilvavecha?
Let's just
Where?
translate that for all our listeners,
Yeah,
please.
yeah, that's right. Lo sisno es achicha, do not hate your brother. Bilvavecha in your heart. Now, there is a concept in understanding Jewish Torah words that there aren't any extraneous words, right? So, what does that mean? Don't hate your brother in your heart. Where else would you hate him? Why can't it just say don't hate your brother, right? And actually, when you see the extraneous word, it's usually the most important word because it's the biggest. It's the clue word. So there is nothing wrong with having a hateful reaction to something hateful. If somebody spits at me, right, I'd be weird if I'd be all like love and, embracing and asking to spit again. I'm going to feel a hateful feeling. And that's actually an appropriate feeling. That's not the problem. The problem is bilvavecha, when I keep it, when I store it, when I hold on to it forever. So there's two ways to get rid of something from your heart. One is to just let it go. Like it was in and I see the circumstances, I get the context. I'm able to be bigger than this and I can let it go to the point where I don't even remember what happened. Or I do the other type of letting out of my heart, which is to get it off my chest, which is to share it, which is to say, that bothered me. Let's have the talk about it. If we do neither of those and we keep storing, there is an accumulation of negativity, and the accumulation of negativity will squeeze out the love and positivity that was there to begin with. And you can experience this not just in marriage. You can have a neighbor that always knocks on the door at the wrong time and always asks you an irritating question and touches you on the back that makes you cringe. And if this happens once, twice, three times, by the time it's 100, when you see this person, you start seething before they've even done anything because you never said, would you mind calling before you pop over? Or I'm very sensory. Like I don't mind a hug, but I don't like little finger movements on my shoulder. If you don't make these points, you're going to end up feeling
Right.
tons of feelings, right? And that
So
happens.
apply that to 10 years of marriage of never telling your spouse I don't like to be touched like this, or I don't like to be called this name, or I don't like this meal, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There's
that's
a
right.
story of a famous Rosh Hashiva that I'm not sure I want to
I
share his
hate that.
name, but I see the story that I'm talking about, that his wife made the first time she made supper chicken fricassee, which I don't even know what that is, by the way. And
Yeah,
I could be pronouncing it wrong. And the Rosh Hashiva said to her, and he wasn't the Rosh Hashiva, then he said, wow, this is delicious. So she started making it almost every night for supper. And I think they were married for a good 60 years or 70 years, maybe, because they both passed away when they were very old. And I think it was like 50 years into their marriage where he finally told her, like, I really do not like this dish. And she was like, what? Like, how did you not tell me that? I thought I'm making you happy, and really I'm not pleasing you. I'm causing you tsar. And it was like so devastating to her. But like, so that's what the simpler thing, right?
you had
Imagine,
the nice version of the story. I had the story that after she was nifta, the kids made it for him for dinner, and he said, "Oh, I hate this dish." They were like,
oh no, I hope that mine is the true version because I
"I
knew them
hope you."
personally very well.
Oh no, so it's probably somebody else. Yeah,
But
right.
like that's exactly what happens. Like, I don't like to be called this, or I don't like to do this, or I don't like this, to be touched this way. And then years and years and years and years of that to the point where
Yeah, Yes, that's right.
So the opposite, share an opposite story. That there's a famous story about Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that at his wife's funeral, when it was time to ask Mechila, he said, I don't need to ask Mechila. And that story was like circulated and like, wow. And the story bothered me for years. Because like, how could it be that people live together and they were married for a long time and they don't have to ask me, like everybody hurts somebody. And I had the opportunity to sit with his daughter once, like a casual, just visit with her. And I asked her, is that story true? She said, absolutely. I said, what does that story mean? Like, explain it to me. And she said, my father asked my mother every day for forgiveness. So he didn't need to ask her again because he had already asked her. That he said, and she said, of course, you live with somebody, you step on their toes. And whenever your toes are stepped on, it hurts. But he always asked for forgiveness. There was no, what you're saying, sinna, hatred in the heart. If there was anything bothering them, they spoke about it.
Right. That's right. I received a very sad phone call from a young man who told me that he wanted, to divorce his wife, and it was a very calm phone call. It was too calm. It wasn't that frenzied, I'm so angry, which made me a little bit nervous. And when I asked him, what went wrong, he was telling me all about it. His wife had no idea. So no idea that he was so upset about so many things. And I confronted him at some point. I'm like, you never gave her an opportunity to change anything. And he said, well, I was just told, like, being a good husband is having nice middos and just like not saying anything when I'm frustrated. I said, well, you're responsible for this then.
Right. So do you think that our yeshiva system and Beis Yaakov system, talking about in the Haredi world and the yeshivish world, and even in the modern Orthodox world, in the Jewish religious world, are we raising our children to be codependent, this kind of behavior? Has the system been set up where, I remember I spoke to Rabbi Hillel Belsky, alav hashalom, and he was talking to me personally, but he was using a mashal or a story that was happening in his life, that he was helping his granddaughter with her homework, and she had to make a list of words that begin with vav, mitzvot, commandments that begin with vav. And she's like, vatronas. And that was the only one she could think of. And he said, why is everything vatronas? Like, why are we just like, like, where did this come from? This bimevater, bimevater, bimevater.
The mevata shmata.
Yeah. Are we, is the educational system geared towards this? Are we doing this to ourselves?
Probably a little bit. Listen, I'm an advocate for people to have nice middos, but it's very easy to not understand what that means. It's you can have a very confrontational conversation with somebody and have good middos, speak respectfully, tell your needs as well as ask them for their needs, be calm, be understanding and thoughtful. You can apply lots of good middos, right?
Absolutely.
For conversation. When that becomes the excuse for never being vulnerable, never being open, never sharing, never never allowing in yourself for a feeling distrust, sadness, anger, any of the things which are considered, to paint a middah terrible without any kind of nuance, it is a very dangerous thing, because what you're doing is you are pushing our kids into suppression, and as a result of that, either they're going to explode, or they're going to implode, or they're going to find resonance somewhere else in the society that actually gives it a little bit of space. And you could argue that it's possible to do that a lot in restrictive societies. People who are suffering from feeling over oppressed by tznius might explode, implode, or seek expression somewhere else. It's very difficult to have a demanding, self-legislating, boundaried society with nuance. It's a difficult thing to pull off. But I do feel that as our educators become a little bit less skilled and our systems become a little bit too big to handle sometimes, we just put prison bars around our kids' expressions and feelings, rather than giving them the tools to be able to self-legislate, and manage their way through them and, understand things in a way that doesn't have to shut them down. Daracheha darchei noam, Rabbi Miller used to say, its ways are very pleasant. If you're experiencing a lack of pleasantness, if you're experiencing a prison, something's wrong with how you're doing it, or something's wrong with how we're teaching our kids.
The perception. The Rabbeinu Yonah in his Hakdama to Mishlei says that Mishlei is all about middos, good middos tovos, having good middos, and that the word midah is measurement, and that every emotion and action and comes with a measurement, and you have to know, like a chemist, how much of each midah and when. And there's a place for every midah. But the question is how much and when.
Yes, and you have to know yourself as well. Whenever I give a class on growing in a midah, right? Like we have to become people who are more outspoken. We have to become people who are more considerate. I always say, whatever I'm saying isn't going to work if you are already too much of this, and this just makes you want to do more of it. You have to know it's not just the application, the midah, which it is. It's also me charting where I am on it. Is my tendency to be too submissive, so I have to learn to be more assertive? Is my tendency to be too non-confrontational, so I need to speak up more? The non-confrontational person who's learning to be more, submissive is going the wrong way. And I need to get into the center, and from the center, I need to learn where to apply. I have to have a certain self-awareness of where I am in this. And sometimes you'll teach about it's really important to communicate your frustrations, and you see the person in the room who's going, I'm like, you have to stop expressing your frustrations because you do this too quickly and too often. You have to be quiet more.
Right,
you have to have a certain self-awareness.
There's no one size fits all. It's
No,
very custom made for every person to find their own voice, and then to have agency over that voice and know when to use it and when it's time to be quiet and when it's time to talk, which is what we, it takes us a lifetime to learn. The question is, when we have a partner who we can learn it with and explore that with and make mistakes. That's a big thing. And I think a lot of what I sometimes hear is, I get a lot of phone calls. Every day I get at least 2-3 phone calls with somebody who speaks to me for 5 minutes, tells me their story, and then says to me, do you think I should get divorced? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It happens on the average of at least once a day that I get that question. Do you think I should get divorced? Which is like, I don't know you. I don't know anything about you. I don't, and usually what those people are really saying is like, I think I'm fine, but my marriage is so flat, right? There's no, like, it's just, there's nothing, we're parallel living together. Like we happen to be living under the same roof. We happen to be married. We happen to have children together. We happen to sometimes share the same bank account, right? But there's literally nothing between us except for daily rituals, religious rituals, and there's no energy. There's no positive energy, at least. And it's just flat. I hear that a lot. And my litmus test of, is someone ready to get divorced is if they call me and ask, which I'll never answer, do you think I should get divorced? No. When someone calls me and says, I have to get divorced, right? Then I know, okay, you're ready, right? This is when you're ready.
Yeah, for sure. This whole pattern was very nicely articulated by a therapist or a psychiatrist, but he certainly wrote books. You ever heard of the Men Are From Mars series?
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
I'm your age.
What?
I'm your age. It was very popular in the 90s.
Very. My husband's it wasn't his Rosh Hashiva, it was the Menahel of the students, insisted that all the engaged couples read it, which was very, very helpful. But he's got other books that are less well known. He's very famous for the Men Are From Mars book.
John Gray, right?
John Gray. And one of his books is called What You Feel You Can Heal. And he talks about the 4 R's. He says that, first of all, you start with love and romance, all the rest of it. That's not one of them. That's the context. You start to feel a certain resistance to how your partner behaves, and the resistance, if it's not dealt with, will become resentment. Right? You start the accumulation, that hakpara, negativity, And if it goes too far, that's going to turn into rejection of the other partner, staying away and whatever, not wanting to be with them. And he said the final stage, which is the most dangerous one, is the repression stage, which is I'm just going to numb this whole process down because there's too much of it and I can't feel it, or so I'll feel nothing. And when couples reach that point of total repression, there's a lot of work to rebuild that. And sometimes the work is going back to the very beginning and to say, I made a mistake when things started to frustrate me to the point that I got resentful, which meant that eventually I rejected you, which means that now I don't even feel anything. I didn't communicate that. Like, let's go forward, let's go back, whichever way you look at it. And let's start to realize that, our marriage deserves us to get a little bit uncomfortable, in terms of our honest conversations. My husband and I have a rule, like sometimes you have to ask what's best for the husband, and sometimes you have to ask what's best for the wife, as the partner. Does he need me to tell him? Do I need to say this? Can I just let it go? But what you're not allowed to do is ignore what's best for the marriage. There's three entities: him, her, and the marriage. If the marriage needs this, then you've got to step out of your comfort zone. So it might be easy for me to just pretend I don't mind because I don't really fancy having a whole deep conversation. But if my marriage is going to suffer as a result of that, then my marriage deserves it. So I think couples will get into
a very, very important diuk clarification that there's him. I like that. There's him, her, and there's the marriage. And we have to do what's best for the marriage.
Yeah.
That's a great golden rule.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a good one. And it's nice when there's one partner who's able to help the non-expressive person express themselves or to not let things slide. But if you have two very nice people, but they're annoying each other, but they're too nice to, talk about it at all, you're going to end up with fatness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're saying there is, even when there is repression, there is a possibility to rebuild.
If there's willingness, there's always a possibility. But sometimes it's harder. Sometimes, if it's been a long time of tremendous resentment and a long time of tremendous rejection, it depends how much there is to fix, but also to heal. 20 years of things to heal is a lot.
It reminds me, it's very similar of John Gottesman's Four Horsemen. It's a similar concept of having this, the Four Horsemen, which I don't remember them all right now. Contempt,
right?
They all start with C's. I don't remember them.
Okay.
And how you have these four horsemen present, right? Scientifically, he found that these couples, these relationships, were doomed to failure, because if you're gonna hold on to this, right, you just said the resistance, the resentment, the rejection, the repression, then you're actually not having a relationship.
Yeah.
Right? And I think part of, Baruch Hashem, my son just got married, and I have, Baruch Hashem, other married children and children in shidduchim. And one of the things that scares me when they're dating, and there's no control that we can have over this, so it's one of these let go and let God things. But you want them to be themselves on a date, right? You want them to present themselves for who they are, not who they're supposed to be on paper in their shidduch resume, right? Could you imagine writing on a shidduch resume? It is really hard for me to get up every morning, right? A bacher writes this. It's really hard for me, but I do it. And sometimes I daven shachris with the minyan every morning, but sometimes it's 11 o'clock, right? Because it's really hard. Getting up in the morning is not my thing, right? No one's going to put that on the shidduch resume, right? You're not going to say, hi, nice, oh, by the way, every morning I daven at around 10 on a good day, 11 on a not so good day, but I come to daven and no matter what, I come to minyan, right? Okay, no one's going to put that on a resume. On the other hand, right, and they're not saying that that's what my kids do, hora and shidduchim, right? That's not what I'm trying to say right now. They have their own stories that they can tell their stories. I'm just using it as a theoretical example. So you're not going to say that. And each person, when they come on a date, they try to present their best selves. Okay. But in the end, right? So best self, or who I want to be my best self, or who I desire to be, or who society tells me to be, is meeting this other person, right? Who is trying to portray a certain image. So image of girl and image of boy are dating instead of girl and boy dating, right? And it's actually the Lubavitcher Rebbe has a very deep Torah on this, which is Rachel and Leah, that everybody has an aspect of Rachel and everybody has an aspect of Leah. And everybody dates as a Rachel, but everybody marries a Leah. That's in a nutshell of a very long, beautiful, complex Torah. And so who is meeting who, right? Who are you really? And I meet with adults who can't answer that question. And some days I can't answer that question myself. I don't know who I am some days, right? Sometimes I'm a nice person. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I don't even ask, right? So it's the concept, which it's interesting when I was in high school and seminary, and then for the first couple of years afterwards, I was teaching. Like learning Musar was like a great focus of everybody. Everybody learned Musar, and today you don't really have that push of learning Musar, right? Or learning Musar Sfarim, or getting into like, what is my motivation for doing something? Are my thoughts pure? Are my motivations pure? Why am I being mivater? Why am I giving in? Am I giving in? Am I giving up? Am I giving down? Like, what am I doing here? So, what can we do to encourage ourselves and others to be more focused and be more authentic and real about who we really are, and not just our Instagram pictures
Yeah.
or statuses? And I'm guilty as everybody. I'm not exonerating myself from this.
So when I was first married, I you could ask me details of the story. I remember no details, but I remember my husband complaining that he was struggling with some kind of Yetzer Hara or whatever, and I was like the young Khaled. I'm like, my husband has a Yetzer Hara. No one told me, I'm like, okay. And then he puts on his coat. I said to him, where are you going? And he goes, I'm going to go see my Rosh Hashiva. He was like a very chashav, formidable person. I said, why? He goes, I just told you I'm struggling with my Yetzer Hara. I need to go talk to him. And I said to him, well, you can't talk to him about that, you know? And he looked at me like, I looked at him like he was crazy. He looked at me like I was crazy. And
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
he said to me, okay, but just one question for you. If I had a broken leg, would you also not let me go see my doctor? You know? Sorry, 1 second. So, if I had a broken leg, would you not let me go see my doctor? And I had a very big moment when he asked me that question, because, I'm looking at him like, you can't tell your Rosh Hashiva about Yetzer Hara, and he's looking at me like, how on earth am I supposed to deal with the Yetzer Hara if I don't have advice from my spiritual leader? What are you talking about? And I realized that I'd internalized that my Yetzer Hara is a reflection of me, and he'd internalized through his education, culture education, so it's somewhat different maybe, that he's a good person, and you have something called the Yetzer Hara, and it tries to trick you and struggle, and there's a way through it that you're supposed to grow from. And I knew that, but I hadn't internalized it. What I'd internalized is, if I have any form of struggle, it's a reflection of something wrong with me that I have to be ashamed of, which is a great trick of the Yetzer Hara. I think on top of that, our societies have got this so goyish, I'm sorry to say this, our very firm societies have bought into perfection. Now, if you ask anybody who reads Musar, who doesn't, are you here to grow? Yes. Is there a Yetzer Hara and a Yetzer Tov? Yes. Are you supposed to struggle to overcome them? Yes. Will you overcome them every time? No. Are you a big tzaddik if you fall and you get up again? Yes. Until chas v'shalom you actually have a Yetzer Hara, in which case, if God forbid you're real with that, you need to be thrown out of school. Our societies have bought into a perfection that we totally don't believe in hashkafically. It's an infiltration of Western perfection, Gashmias external values that have completely crept in to go against everything we know about what it means to be a struggling, imperfect, growing human. You cannot grow if you're perfect. So why are the only kids that are acceptable in shidduchim perfect? I have to say, when we were dating, we were absolutely encouraged to sit down and figure out each other's imperfections and faults and needs. And you said you can't say, I struggle to go to minyan. I'm like, well, why not? What in our society means that you can't share that? So you're supposed to lie to the girl, and then she now has not a davner, but a guy that she can't respect or trust because he lied his way through the dating process, and now she's supposed to be emotionally and physically intimate with him. That's not worse than knowing that he struggles with many. Like, what has happened to us that we don't understand? The growth means that we're going to hit imperfections, and we're going to be a zidduch doesn't just mean that everything's matched because it's perfect. It means that it's aligned to deal with life. And if life is about growth, then who are we kidding that we're perfect? And never mind the anxiety that comes from kids who feel that they're less than perfect, and the whole line of anxiety, depression that is completely connected to perfectionism. I think we have done a terrible disservice by forgetting what it means to be a human being in the prosdor, of growth. We've bought out of that. And it's doing a tremendous disservice to our marriages and our kids.
Agreed. Very much agreed. Just to go back to the idea of structure and building and boundaries, right? Every structure, we're talking about building homes, every structure needs boundaries. And there's the sanctity of myself, my agency over myself, and who am I? And then there's the other boundary is for the people around us. And how does a person pinpoint or recognize when a home, their home, and I'm not talking about obviously the physical home, has become structurally unsound, beyond repair, or that it's in great danger? What are some of the signs?
So I was in preparation for this conversation, I was looking up what the Mishnah says about when it's a good time to get divorced. Now the Mishnah is very interesting because it gives you what will look superficially like ridiculous examples, but as is the Mishnah, they are just cryptic use cases, so you can derive, a deeper principle.
Actually, the next part in the series, which is the Kabbalistic interpretations of those examples.
Right. And they're not always, it's not just Kabbalistic. There's Kabbalistic and there's also spiritual. It was actually funny because I confess I asked ChatGPT to source it for me because I didn't know where to look, and ChatGPT was trying to be a macabre of me to not read it superficially, but to understand that there's something deeper going on over here, which I thought was, I'm like, wow, I have such a firm ChatGPT. I had to press my buttons. But we were talking, for example, about Rabbi Akiva, who says, if you've lost favor in each other's eyes, and which sounds like, if you don't pant each other, excuse the crass way of speaking, then just give it up and go somewhere else, which is not really Rabbi Akiva's tendency to life.
Mamish not. Yeah, that's not. I don't think that's what the intention is.
You have to ask the question: if I'm at a point where you no longer find any favor in me, what is it that has eroded? What elastic has been pulled the wrong way that has come to a point where the elastic is completely, broken? And a lot of the things that you find as themes, and I think they're good themes, are, when the respect has gone because our values are misaligned, and when the trust has gone because we're not emotionally compatible. At that point, you have very little chance of building anything. We live in a society that really puts much too much pressure on love alone. Love alone is a very nice romantic theme if you're trying to make a movie. I say that our concept of romance is the less likely, the more romantic it is. And if you look at all the children's fairy tales, none of those marriages work really, because Cinderella is not in the same socioeconomic, and Sleeping Beauty is not even in the same century. They're not supposed to work, which is what makes them so romantic, because it's like, oh, even though that doesn't work in real life, it works in the movie, and therefore, people like it. It appeals. But in reality, Yeah, in reality, it's not fair to ask love to work to function in a vacuum. It's not fair that it carries all the weight of broken trust and broken respect. And again, respect will happen when the values either discover themselves to be completely unaligned, or over time become completely aligned, or the couple isn't doing the work necessary to make sure that as they are developing who they are, they're finding common points in their values. Meaning you are allowed to go on a personal journey as well as a marital journey, through your adult life. But you can find common points with your spouse. If you don't make that a conscious, intentional exercise, you're going to feel that you have nothing left in common anymore. And emotionally as well. If the way that we behave towards each other, just doesn't make us feel loved or respected, worshipped, treated nicely. The Rambam says very, very simply, he has to treat her like a queen and she has to treat him like a lord and master, right? It's a very unpopular language. What I've come to understand is that, it's an indication for love and respect. And I don't know if it's male to female. I think it's masculine to feminine, meaning we each have in us a piece of masculine and a piece of feminine that needs to be respected and loved. So I have to treat my husband's masculine with respect and his feminine with love, and vice versa. He has to treat me the same way. If those components aren't there, and we don't talk about it when we start to see cracks in that natural compatibility, and because we can restore compatibility with conversation, then we're going to find ourselves finding that love doesn't work by itself.
Wow. Okay, you said a lot there. I'm gonna have to listen to that again and break it down into bite-sized pieces. In your book, you talk extensively about anxiety. What does let's take a moderate, right? A moderately anxious person look like inside a marriage? And how does that anxiety show up in ways that damage the relationship? And one more, how can the less anxious spouse help support without, not taking control, not trying to control, but within a respectful way? What advice would you give them? How can they be supportive to the anxious spouse?
Yeah, wow, what a great question. And assuming that both spouses may be anxious, they just may have to play different roles at different times over here. I think I'm going to start by saying it can take many, many forms. People who are nervous to be honest, people who are very OCD in how they keep the house, that might be a form of anxiety. People who are overly worried, people who have lack of self-confidence. There are so many forms it can take. So I don't want to address the forms it can take, because each person listening needs to know how their anxiety expresses itself. But what I will say, and I think this is probably can be applied as a golden rule, is that if you are trying to support the anxiety in your spouse or in yourself, and you've been doing the same thing again and again and again, and it isn't working, then you actually, this is going to sound very banal, you need to try something different. And I'll tell you what I mean by that, right?
Isn't that what Albert Einstein said, right? That insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Exactly. But sometimes, you'll have, for example, let's take a very typical scenario where, a person has asked, one person has sort of failed at their tasks. I don't know, a young woman, and she's behind on her laundry. Let's make it very stereotypical, okay? And the husband is looking for his socks and he can't find it, and it's making him late, and he's getting anxious, and she's feeling very blamed, but also guilty and like a failure because her laundry's always on time, and all these patterns. And she gets into, and I promise, she'll have socks tomorrow. And then he feels bad because she realizes that she feels more blamed than he needs me. They get into a loop, whatever the loop is. What couples will find is that they're going to enter the loop pattern again and again and again. She's going to promise, he's going to reassure, a month later, no socks again, a month later, no socks. When you're finding yourselves looping, which tends to happen when you're hitting people's psychological blocks, the time to change that loop is not the next time you're in it. The time to change it is actually between loops. when all the laundry's done and she's feeling great and he's feeling great and he's, it's to sit down and say, that pattern that we both hate because you feel inadequate and I feel like a bully. Can we discuss now that we're having a lovely evening, like how not to be in that pattern, And that's the time where it's time for there to be some like real honesty here. For her to say, I only overpromise because I actually feel so much judgment. For him to say, I only get aggressive because I don't know what to do with the fact that I've put you under pressure, and to actually say, what's another way out of this? What's another way through this? Can we communicate about our loops and say, where do we keep on hitting the same wall? And instead of expecting to run into the wall and not get concussion, let's find a way through the wall. And very often when a person's hitting anxiety, they need to have total support. She might need to not have to succeed at keeping the look. She might need to feel that it's okay, and let's come up with a technical solution around this. Maybe he'll buy himself 100 spare socks for the days where the laundry's on. There can be a way around it. But getting in and out of the same loop is a very normal thing that couples go through, and it's a very painful thing. And again, the loop only comes up because it's painful when you're in it. When you're out of it, you communicate about the loop. And in that place, we can be a little bit more honest and more vulnerable. And if you're really stuck and you need outside help, you can get outside help with it. But I think often when you are outside of it, that's often enough of the outside help.
I think sometimes without outside help, couples just can't make the time. If you don't put aside the time and say, okay, we're gonna go to a therapist, and sometimes a lot of couples don't need the therapist, they need the time, and they need that accountability that we're paying for this hour, so we're actually going to really talk about what needs to get spoken about and carve out that time. Because even though we have so many conveniences, I find that we have I know within my own marriage, like if I don't make a point, and I spend a lot of the time of my day with my husband traveling, like it's not like we don't see each other. We see each other, but if we don't say, okay, we need to have a real conversation and carve out of time, it just doesn't happen. And then we're already, as you say, in the next loop, going for Hakafa Zion because we didn't make we just don't find the time unless you make the effort to make the time. And as you were describing these loops, it reminds me of the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva and the laws of doing tshuva in the Mishnah Torah, where he speaks about what is tshuva gemura, what is complete repentance. Complete repentance is a person is in a similar situation, which means it's the same script, but there's different actors and different scenery and different props, but it's pachot yoter, more or less the same script, and the person makes a better choice, right? So how do you get to make that better choice, right? The Rambam is describing the loop that you're talking about right now. You're going to keep, and if it's not going to be socks, it's going to be, underwear or a shirt, or there's no one put the water back, the water pitcher back in the refrigerator. Whatever it is, doesn't matter what it is. It's going to be something. Unless we take the time out and say, okay, let's have this conversation and let's do it. And in that same paragraph of Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam says that a person could say, where am I supposed to, how do I know how I'm supposed to fix? And I'm translating it into what you were saying, Ilana, this loop. How do I fix this loop? So the Rambam says, Tov v'yashar Hashem, al kein yoreh chatoim baderech. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is good and straight, and he will teach those on the path, meaning those who say, I want, those who really seek to fix the loops or the hang-ups, and they seek it. Hashem will not abandon us. Hashem will send us to a good rabbi, a good rebbitzin, a good therapist, a good book. There's so much out there, a great podcast, right? And Hashem will send us that we'll hear that, and we'll have that inspiration to say, okay, these are the patterns. I want to get out of this pattern because I love my spouse and I want to have a good marriage. And so I'm going to carve out that time to make that. And maybe a lot of people don't know how to have a conversation, right? How do I tell my husband of 30 plus years that I cannot stand it, right? That he, whatever, forgets to put his cereal bowl in the sink, okay? And he's not a child. You want to treat him as a child, it's not our kids. Okay, put your bowl in the sink, right? etc., or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't include me in the finances. We can make, everybody has a long list of things. And that's also a place where a person can really get help. And just to loop it back to the beginning of the conversation, where repressing that is always going to lead to all of the other horsemen, the resilience, the resistance, the not the resilience, the resistance, and the rejection. And then it's a really hard road to come back from that.
It is. There's a lot of self-help communities that have been really proven to be incredibly effective. There's, you said before, let go and let God. That comes from the AA community, right? Like you didn't know that, right?
A long time member of Coda, and people ask me sometimes, like, what Hasidus are you a part of? I'm like, the 12 steps, like that's, it's a great program. It's a great program. And speaking of which, one of the teachings of the 12 steps is that secrets are not healthy, right? Secrets. So, keeping a secret that I don't like this food, or I don't like the way you do this, or I don't like to be touched like this, that's not a sign of health. It's quite the opposite.
But one of the things that
your secrets.
Yeah. One of the things that's so beautiful about self-help, and I've seen this in many forms. It's not, I've seen it, probably in the starkest form in the AA community, but I've seen this in many forms. I saw it, there's a juicing community, people who are trying to stay healthy who juice, right? There's been an understanding that in a generation that is not as strong as they once were back in the good old days, right? And we see through how the Musa Sfarim themselves have changed their tune, as the writers become a little bit more modern, or the generations move down. Willpower alone is a very bad recipe for success. What a lot of these organizations or enterprises or endeavors have discovered is that actually you need community actually as well as willpower, because there's going to be a day where your willpower just fails you, but somebody else can cheer you on, and I think there's something to be said about wider community and friendships and all the rest of it. But I think also, when a couple's experiencing issues within their marriage, to see themselves as a community, for the couple to okay, we're the couple, there's an external problem over here. How do we, the team, fight the external problem over here? You don't want to include me in the finances. I hate your mother. We have a kid who's struggling, and we have different chinuch approaches to it. Okay, these are all our external issues over here. Can we team up so that we are the community that are dealing with this external problem, rather than making the problem come between us, so that we are facing it like alone, and it's turning us against each other in our marriage? That's got to be a very deliberate conversation. Mothers-in-law is a great example. It happens to be that, Baruch Hashem, I'm blessed with a very wonderful mother-in-law. They could be a very, big source of contention. So what's going to be? They're going to spend their whole marriage, one of them is going to complain about the mother-in-law, and the other one is going to defend the mother. The whole marriage, they're going to do that, to the point where the feelings that they have, not even the mother-in-law herself, but the feelings that they have, and then is going to put them onto such opposite sides of the table that they can't ever communicate about it, and hope that the topic never raises its. No, 1 second. If she's a difficult woman, she's probably affecting both our lives. We don't have to play this, I need to accuse that I know that you like me better than her, versus I have to defend because it's my mother. Why is that dynamic is making us very separated? Why do we say we have this woman in our life that has good and bad, but that it's a pressure? So how does our marriage contend with it? The defending party needs to have sometimes spouses room to say, yeah, this is really irritating me. And the insecure party needs to come to a point where they feel secure enough that they can say, actually, she was very nice to me today. Can we team up? Or are we letting the external problem or the dynamic problem get between us? Can we be our own community to support our marriage?
Because in the end of the day, that's what marriage really is.
Yeah.
Right? It's us supporting each other. When the other one is down, we're there for them. When we're down, they're there for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was a great conversation. I am very, very inspired and educated, and I really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure all our listeners do. And you could reach out to Ilana. It says in the description, her great book you can order on Amazon, her website. And thank you so much for joining us. And we should be zocheh to all bask in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the third Beis HaMikdash, which is, that's it. A binyan adei ad, as we wish every couple as they get married. Thank you.
1 million. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's so